Okay, so I have battle damaged this quite a bit. I used a bunch of different methods. I used a Dremel in some places. I used a drill. I used a lot of different blades on hobby knives. I used some sanding sticks. I used just about everything. And I've also added a couple things here and there that we'll take a look at. Not too much, but let's take a look at the overall effect. So, from the front, track guards are damaged. I left, when I did the Dremel, just to gouge out here, a little bit of plastic came up. I decided to leave that, as if like, damaged, melted metal a little bit. We've got plenty of stuff over here. I also did a lot of, let me see if I can find some, cutting off some rivets, because, like in, real life military vehicles in combat, rivets might come out during maintenance, might forget to be replaced, might lose some rivets, in the course of the day or something. So what I'll have to do is actually drill those holes to show that there are empty holes where, or I shouldn't say rivets, they're not rivets, they're bolts, but where those bolts go in some places like that, where there's a big chunk out, I don't have to do the drilling, which is great. But I'll have to go back and I'll have to drill those little holes. But we've got not a whole lot of damage up on the cannon, but plenty of, scrapes, gouges, stuff like that. Moving down the side. I wanted the damage to look random, but I also wanted it to look very spread out throughout. There's areas on each side where I removed some of these track skirts over there. So you'll see on the other side. Now that meant that I had to get in here, and I still need to do a little bit, I see, of removing these pins that actually hold the track skirts to these wheels, and then we'll have to sand that and make that flush, so a little bit of work to do there. But lots of battle damage, and I wanted to get no one area like too destroyed, because this is still supposed to be a serviceable vehicle, but I wanted it to kind of match a lot of the damage that was done to these resin parts. Upper surface up here, not too bad, because let's keep in mind, as this traverses around, where are rounds going to hit? Probably not a lot on the top of the superstructure here. A little bit of damage there, but not too much. To the back, I really just did damage to these track guards again. Enough damage was done there, which is why we're doing damage to everything else. And then on this side, now on this side, I removed the skirts, but just to give you something interesting to look at, I was really careful to leave the hinges in place. So on this side, like the hinges are gone and everything, but on this side, the hinges are still there, like they're hanging, but we lost our track skirts, with lots and lots of damage to every other surface all around. I don't know how the Emperor is going to feel about this, but oh well. And then I started to do some other work, but I decided to hold on until I got everything else done. I started making a mount. I had a heavy stubber, but I did not have a mount for it, so I started scratch building that. I need to cut that down quite a bit to put that on there. But work's coming along pretty nicely on this. A couple little details here and there on the superstructure. We need our towing attachments, front and back. I need to make a heavy bolter that affixes to the hole right there. A little bit more finishing work, kind of all around. But this is just about ready to get primed for painting. Yay! So let me go and start assembling some of the pieces we need to finish this off and do some of that detail filling work we looked at, and we'll take a look at it again. We are really to the point where we're just about totally finished with the actual build up here. So since the last time you saw this, Rogue One's over, I added old school hatch doors. I really like the way these look, and considering that these are all supposed to be very old vehicles, I thought it'd be fitting. So these were spares from a Forge World turret set that I put on there. I love the look of a heavy stubber up top. Storm bolters are cool, but I just love the long-barreled look of the heavy stubber. So I put one on. I didn't have a mount for it, so I had to make a mount out of plastic, but that came out pretty good, and I think just big enough for it to look kind of menacing on top of this thing. Copied basically the look of a heavy stubber on another one. It was one of the older Forge World heavy stubbers, though, with the vertical magazine. Looks kind of like a, is it a Bren gun from World War II? I don't know. I'll have to double check that later. But I added that on top. So now, really, I'm looking at the last bunch of kit supplied parts here that I need to put on there. What I need to make, though, is that the actual Stormblade has a heavy bolter mounted kind of right there in the hull. I have to make the mount. When you're building your Baneblade, there's a little turret right here that can have a pair of heavy bolters. So I'm using one of the heavy bolters because it's the perfect size and it's cut just to about the right length, looking at the references I have. So now what I need to do is just build a mount, some heavy plates on there, and I realize I'm going to lose that beautiful battle damage scar that I put there by doing this, but it needs to go right about there. Can't decide. I have not decided if I'm going to put a commander figure in there. I mean, I have the doors open. I might as well put the figure in there. I just got to go select which figure I'm going to put in there when it's all done. But I'm loving the look of this thing. It's coming out better than I imagined it would. So I'm going to grab some stock plastic and start working on the mount for this bolter. It's going to fit right about there. And next time you see this, it will have everything put on, assembled, and be ready for some primer. All right, finally finished all the construction parts. So we've got all of our plastic pieces on. Found did a pick and choose of the commander bits that I wanted. So he's kind of a Frankenstein of different pieces. A very interesting way of fitting him in there, because you're supposed to put the commander in before you assemble everything. Did a little modifying on the stubber to get him looking like he's got one hand on it. And I really wanted to use this arm with the braid on it, because it comes out really nice when it's all done. I had to do some weathering and damage on the other pieces that I put on, once we did all the assembly. Got the engine grates on there. So finally it is all ready to, very rudimentary and simple, forgot the name of it, heavy bolter. The one, I looked at pictures of the real thing, and there's a bit more detail than that goes into it, but not a whole lot, so I'm going to leave it very simple, since it's just a scratch-built thing right there. Mount for it and everything. And there's already going to be so much that you're going to be looking at on this thing, as is. And we know it's a conversion. It's not the original, so I don't have the original pieces, obviously. But I'm still really proud of it. So I'm going to let this just sit overnight, and tomorrow I'll get it all primed. I need to drill a hole there since I lost one of my bolts, apparently. But, yeah, tomorrow, spray the whole thing with a black primer, and then I can get to painting. At this point, I've got everything finished, construction-wise, everything ready. I've primed it all with Chaos Black. We're all ready to start painting. There's a couple little areas that I forgot to fill and sand, and so, a little primer wore off there, but that's okay, because I'm not so much worried about that area, because that's going to be pretty weathered up in there anyway. But other than that, this guy's ready for airbrushing. So I was thinking really hard about the colors I wanted to use, and I decided that, to me, overall, these super heavy tanks have a very German/Russian World War II kind of influence look. That big, chunky, heavy vehicle coming at you, So I decided the primary color, I'm going to do a two-color camouflage scheme. Primary color is going to be Model Master Russian Armor Green. And the secondary color is going to be by, look, I honestly don't know how to pronounce it, AKAH. It's a Russian paint company. AKA? Or is it just AKAH? I don't know, but these are Russian paints. They're acrylics. I use them extensively when I build Russian aircraft, because they're made to match, very specifically, Russian aircraft colors. And there are some colors that are just not available in any other paint manufacturer. So it's going to be Russian Armor Green, which is a bit darker green than this shows, and it says reddish as the color there, but it's kind of a mid-brown color as the two-color camouflage. I'm also going to do some black in between the two colors, and you'll see kind of not stripes all the way through, but I mean, it'll make sense when I do it. So I'm letting my airbrush soak right now. I haven't used it in a while, so I just want to make sure it's nice and clean and ready to go. So first I'm going to lay down the Russian Armor Green sections, then I'm going to lay down the reddish sections. Once that's done, then I'm going to do, like I said, a little bit of shading, faded panels, and just, giving it a really battle-worn look here and there. before we even do the weathering. You know, this is an old tank, it has seen a lot of action, and it needs to show it. One of the things that you're going to notice as I go through this is that the Russian Armor Green is a semi-gloss paint, and that the reddish is a flat paint, so it's going to have very different look as I go through the painting, and it's going to look a little bit weird at first, but that's totally okay. We'll make it all look the same sheen when it's all done. Now, when I'm painting, I like to listen to Angry Video Game Nerd in the background, but you know, I'm going to play this in triple, quadruple, maybe 16 times speed, so you guys enjoy the 16-bit fine video game music I have to offer. I started masking for the tracks and the wheels, but then I realized I'm going to come back with a brush and I'm going to do the tires on the wheels and the tracks by hand anyway, so I just stopped just so I can get the hubs painted nice and quick. So now I'm going to clean the airbrush out, and then I'm going to switch this stuff. If you try to thin it down for airbrushing with anything but water, it's going to get really, really clumpy. So let me get all set up for this, and then we'll paint reddish. Okay, well, the first two primary colors are done. One of the things about these paints is that they separate very quickly and they get very watery. It's kind of a pain in the butt, but like I said, you need colors that you really don't find anywhere else. And the brown, you know, is really light in some areas, a little darker in others. That's cool because that's going to help with the weathering later on. There's going to be so much going on detail-wise that any other spaces that are just black. Now, I left the fuel drums on purpose because I want to paint them like an OD green. But Right now, this guy is looking pretty good, and now I'm getting ready to paint the... Before I move on to the hand brush painting of the black that separates the colors a little bit, I'm just going to do a little bit of this lighter green, and it's green faded, just to lighten up some of the green panels a little bit. The brown kind of, if you noticed, because of the inconsistency, the way it paints, it sort of starts weathering itself. I want to lighten up some of the green though, because, you know, Model Master is a great quality paint, and it usually has very good consistency all throughout as you're painting it. So I'm going to put some of this on just to lighten up some of those green panels here and there, and then we'll be ready for the hand painting. It's kind of a subtle effect. I don't know how it's shown up on camera, but lightening up some panels and leaving some dark, and, you know, we did some full light green on top, and it just sort of gives around edges and a little bit in the middle, gives that worn, lighted kind of lightening of the paint look. You know, when we do our edge painting with an even lighter color, that'll really come to life and give it a really good look. Now we're ready to clean out the airbrush and do the black in between the actual camouflage colors. What I want to do with the black is I want to apply it in little areas in between the green and the brown as something that would break up the outline of the vehicle, you know, in a real traditional camouflage sense. Something that would give you, in model-wise, something else to look at. But really, you know, when you're camouflaging a vehicle, a two-color camouflage is great, but you still have lines that you'd want to break up, and a shape and an outline of a vehicle that you'd want to break up. So that's what I'm going to be doing with the black. In my experience, it works really, really well if you water down the black paint. You don't paint straight black paint when you're doing this. It just flows a little easier and helps you make some finer lines, and that's what I'm going to be doing as I go through this. Well, that is a time-consuming process, but I think it really adds something to the camouflage there, and you know, glad I sat through it all. So next thing I want to do is give this all just a little bit of time to sit and rest. I want to have some lunch, but we are doing pretty well, coming along very, very nicely. We've got them, you know, the main painting is done, and we've got the most time-consuming thing coming up, which is the detail painting. Lots of stuff with a little tiny brush. We'll go handheld for a minute just to kind of get a look at everything and where we're at so far with the painting. All the battle damage is going to be picked out with the detail painting, but you can see how kind of the multiple greens really give a faded, worn look to that green. We haven't even done the weathering yet. Just doing that little bit of the light green on top really helps distinguish some panels and make the paint look kind of faded. This brown, like I said, it starts to weather itself because it's such a watery paint, which is great. We've got lots of detail painting to go. God, it's going to be so much. I noticed I actually forgot to put these little pieces in here, but that's great. That's fine because those pieces are going to end up being
painted a completely separate color anyway, so it doesn't even matter that they're not in there yet. They'll be super glued in later, and you know they're going to be painted kind of like a metallic-y black color. So I mean that all kind of works out. It didn't even occur to me until I was doing the painting that they're not in there. But I think the overhead view is pretty nice. I think the colors work really well together. I know they look pretty light right now, but they're going to be very darkened up before we're all done with this thing. And just imagine all that battle damage, you know, picked out with metallics and other, you know, charcoals and you know, burn marks and soot and everything. Really excited to do the detailing on the plasma cannon. It's going to be awesome. Our commander is going to look great up there with his stubber. So this is going to look great. Really excited. So I'm going to call this good for part 3 here. And I hope you guys will join me for part 4, where we pick out all these little details that we put on, where we make this thing now look battle-tested, battle-worn, and start getting it ready for a tabletop somewhere.